Back with the Weekend Journal here on News Talk 580 WTCM. I'm Jack O'Malley, and well, it's good to be here with you. Now, I've talked about this interview for the last couple of weeks because there's been so much bubbling up in the news and out of Lansing. And with me today, and I'm happy to have him here, is Chair Jade DeBoyer, who is a representative from the St. Clair, Macomb County areas, and he chairs the House Oversight Committee, and he joins us this morning. Chairman, good morning. Good to have you here.
Hey, great to be here, Jack. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So just a little background here. I was on Oversight for a couple of years during the COVID, a couple of terms, I should say, and during the COVID, and I really understand how important oversight is. And so you have, I have the Oversight Committee, so I guess, first of all, let me just ask you, when you got that chairmanship, what were your thoughts? How did you want to proceed?
Yeah, Speaker Matt Hall appointed me to that chairmanship, which, I appreciate that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, I'm a hometown business mind-oriented guy who has watched government grow and develop this fourth limb called the bureaucratic state. And I think we have number one, I know we have a statutory responsibility and right to run oversight, as you're aware,
Yep.
Jack. And second, the term previous to me, there was very little, frankly, darn close to none that occurred over the other departments and agencies within state government. So when I was asked to be that chair of the Oversight Committee, my first thought was, we're going to just do some fact finding. We're going to dig into some things. We're going to look for the truth. And our hope would be, as we progress through that we find behaviors, actions, expenditures, policies that should be modified, changed, and reined in. And
Sure.
so that's kind of what we're working on right now, Jack.
So your guys, and I have some very specific questions coming up, but
Sure.
you guys kind of going about it a little bit different. And I know Chair Hall or Speaker Hall has had some experience in this too. But you have the main Oversight Committee, and then you have 6 subcommittees. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So what Chairman Hall did, which I think was brilliant, was he broke down into 6 different subcommittees, different topics in government that address different types of behavior out of government, right? And each of those subcommittees is a 5-member subcommittee, and they're going to deal with specific topics associated with their subcommittees. I'm grabbing my list of subcommittees. The first one is the child welfare system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's chaired by Representative Merriman. We have corporate subsidies and state investments. So, think MEDC or strategic fund type stuff, chaired by Representative Cara. We have Homeland Security and Foreign Influence, which is chaired by Representative Bruck, who's a veteran, very meticulous guy, can really dig into details. He's been doing great work on that. We have Public Health and Food Security, which is chaired by Representative Bierlein. State and local assistance programs. So, there's, as you know, Jack, there's a myriad of those.
Yeah.
And that's chaired by Representative Wolford. And then we have weaponization of state government. And I think that speaks for itself what that is. And that's chaired by Representative Regas.
Sure.
And so those 6 subcommittees will deal with different topics that would fall into their category. And then what the full Oversight Committee will do or is doing, some things are going to come into those subcommittees. They're going to get kicked up to the full oversight because it will be a big enough deal. It will be enough of a topic that would justify it to come to the full oversight. The full oversight is also going to deal with, some of the larger items that we're facing in the state of Michigan. Whether it be employees coming back to work in person, or whether it be, departments not cooperating with appropriations chairs, or you've probably heard about the Secretary of State issue with our elections chair.
No, I hadn't heard a little bit about that.
Yep. And so in that full oversight committee, the House granted that full oversight committee subpoena power, to subpoena individuals, to subpoena testimony, to subpoena documents, to subpoena depositions, those kinds of things, which is a very powerful tool. But yet, which to me, it means that we have to use it responsibly, right?
Yep.
And you know how the politics goes. Everybody goes immediately to it's just all witch hunt political stuff, which it's not, and it won't be. But that's the defense a lot of them use, Jack.
Sure. So let's jump into the Secretary of State right now.
Sure.
Explain what's going on there. Your subcommittee says, "Hey, we want certain documents or certain training films or whatever," and Benson is kind of dragging her feet.
You know, truthfully, it's a stonewall. It's political stonewalling. But I'll lay out for you how this all came together. So, as you're aware, Rochelle Smith is the chair of elections. Rochelle Smith also was on the elections committee in the last term. And in November, after it was clear that we had taken the majority back in the House, Representative Smith sent a simple request to the Bureau of Elections Secretary of State and requested the training materials that are used by the Secretary of State's office to train local clerks, municipal clerks, townships, cities, county clerks. And they just ignored her. They requested it again, and again, this training manuals is what was requested. Ignored her again. We came into the new term. At that point, Representative Smith is now, at that point, is the chair of elections, which is a rather important committee with regard to relationships with the Secretary of State. And she submitted a formal request again for further documents, and again, basically ignored. So Representative Smith formally came to the Oversight Committee, laid out the timeline of a request, laid out the information that was requested, and what we did is we just, to try to be professional, to try to be appropriate, we simply submitted a letter from the Oversight Committee asking the Secretary of State to provide this information, and drug out. We then followed with another letter asking for an update with a hard deadline. Lo and behold, at 5 o'clock on the night before the hard deadline, we got some stuff, but we didn't get near all of it, not even close. And so we went into committee just a short time after that, discussed the timeline, discussed the letters, laid it all out, talked about the behavior, and the committee voted to authorize a subpoena to be issued with regard to these items that have been requested. And then we did that. We drafted that subpoena. I signed it. We served it on the Secretary of State's office. And then the next thing I know, the Secretary of State is saying, if you want this stuff, we're going to go to court. And the disappointment in this for me is that, you know, the Secretary of State has consistently said that it's the most transparent office in the state of Michigan. It's the most transparent Secretary of State's office that we've ever had. And we are legitimately asking for training material, and they've decided that they're just not going to give it to us. And if we want it, we're going to have to get a court order to get it.
Well, and one of the things I think about that is it's training material that they send out to every clerk's office, as I understand it. So
that's correct.
But they don't want you to look at it. But once it gets in those clerks' hands, they have no idea who's looking at it. So I don't think there's any national security things that are listed in that training material. You wouldn't think.
No, you're absolutely correct. That's the irony of it. And you know, could Rochelle Smith and myself go to some local clerk and say, hey, pull this stuff up? But you know what? Number one, we shouldn't have to do that.
That's true.
Number two, I don't want to put some local clerk in a position between a disagreement between the Secretary of State and myself or Representative Smith. That's just not appropriate. And I'm a little bit stunned that we're being stonewalled like this. As you said, no joke, nearly 5,000 individuals in the state of Michigan. Those are clerks, those are deputy clerks, those are elections directors at counties, in some cases elections directors and their deputies at cities, larger cities, all have access to this. But somehow the chairman of Oversight, duly elected and appointed, and the chairman of Elections, duly elected and appointed, are a security risk to this information. I'm not trying to be facetious. I actually can't understand the logic behind that.
I'm with you. It doesn't make sense. So
our role.
Where are you headed? Are you going to court?
I think that's certainly a possibility.
Sure.
I would hope that the people at the Secretary of State's office and at the Bureau of Elections take a step back and think about what this fight is that they're picking, because we're not picking a fight. We're simply asking for some information, because I think it's important that your listeners know the role, right? Our role, the chair of elections role, is to be certain that elections are being administered within the guidelines of state statute. And if the person who has that responsibility is unable to get the elections training material that's being used by the Secretary of State's office for local clerks to administer elections, I'm trying to figure out how you do your statutory duty.
Yeah, and I have real questions, too, about Secretary Benson, some of the things that she's done, like holding a press conference in the lobby of her building when I'm sure first day you came into the legislature, you heard, don't do anything political on state grounds. When she released all back during the 2020, and she sent out all those applications for ballots, which had never been done from the state level. It had always been done from the local clerk angle. She has her own idea of how to run the state elections, and you guys, ultimately your job is to set the legislation, and then she's supposed to follow it. So it is a question that it'll be interesting. I think it'll be good to get her in court, because then she's truly under oath in a court of law, not just in a House committee.
That's correct. That is correct. I would remind you that on that matter in 2020, she did a couple of things that were totally outside of election law.
Very true.
She told local clerks to disregard the validation of signatures on AV ballot applications and AV ballot return envelopes. When I say disregard, meaning be lenient about the comparison of those signatures, complete violation. I was a county clerk at the time, and I instructed my local clerks that they had an obligation to uphold the Constitution and the law as it's written and to not do that.
Yeah.
The second thing she did, and you just touched on it, was she mailed out unsolicited absent voter applications to people. That's a violation of election law. Mm-hmm. The law clearly says that an election official cannot mail out unsolicited absent voter application. And there's a very simple reason why, Jack. If I'm a Republican, why would I mail it to Democrats? Right?
Yeah.
Or if you're a Democrat, why would you? So what they said in statute is you may not mail out an unsolicited absent voter application. She did it anyway. Yep. She spent $6 or $7 million to do it.
And she claimed that basically, I think as I remember, it was all because of COVID. So let's move on for just a minute here. One of the things that I saw you quoted on, and I agree with you 100%, is that the Auditor General generally is the one who does reports on things, different departments and whatnot. And you said that there were over 50 different of those types of reports from state audits done over the last couple of years. That is things you have to look at. Some of them, I'm sure, are minor, but others really make you question and say, what's going on here? That's the job of an oversight chair, correct?
That is exactly our job. And there were, I think something like 50 or 48 Auditor General reports came out last term. Exactly none of them were addressed in any degree of thoroughness by the Oversight Committee last term. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to remind you, it was not my party that was in charge of that Oversight Committee. I think they had a total of 4 oversight hearings in 24 months. And I'm certain that your listeners know, as well as we know, that the volume of just sheer waste that occurs in government can warrant more than 4 oversight hearings.
Well, yeah, and I remember different oversight. I won't go into detail, but the Auditor General comes in and they lay out what they found, and all they can do is lay out what they find. It's the Oversight Committee's job to say, why did that happen?
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
So let me ask you this. I know there's lots of things and only have a certain amount of time, but one of the things that I've witnessed in oversight is oversight committees can come up with a lot. Some of it is political theater, historically speaking. I won't say anything about your committees, but historically speaking, oversight can be used for political theater. But it can also be used to find out real issues. The problem I've seen historically with our state's oversight committees is they get maybe a news story here, maybe a news story there, and real change doesn't happen because it's so hard to get people to pay attention. That's my take on it. So I guess my question to you, as a newly minted oversight chair who has a lot of enthusiasm, how do you get the ball to move forward when you do find problems and you can find corrective measures? How do you get something to actually happen that means something?
Well, I'll say this to you. And number one, with no disrespect to any of the previous caucuses and terms that you served, we have a different leader here.
That's true.
Speaker Matt Hall has been specific and he has been clear. And he has created a structure here that we operate in truth and we operate in results. And the reason I say that to you is as soon as committee chairmanships were all assigned and put in place, a meeting was had that was simply this: policy committees, appropriations committees, and oversight committees are going to work together to implement good policy on behalf of the taxpayers of the state of Michigan. Which means if a appropriations committee discovers an issue that they believe is inappropriate, they're going to share that with oversight. If oversight digs into things and discovers a practice or a policy that is bad, they're going to make a formal recommendation to the policy committee that would address that from a statute perspective. And the same thing with policy. They're going to recommend to appropriations and to oversight issues that they see that are a current problem that might be managed by having an oversight hearing or perhaps might be managed by whacking a budget.
Sure.
And we literally do work together in that fashion, which I don't know because I wasn't here. You might have more historic knowledge on that. I would say that that's a little bit of a new trend and a better behavior.
Yeah, I won't argue with you. I think there was, working together to some degree. A chair would suggest this or that, but yeah, it makes sense. And I think that I don't know. There just does appear to be a let's do this right. Let's do it out in the open. And but ultimately, Jay, you're going to have to get the press to pay attention. And sometimes they like the shiny object. So I guess the next story or this, that, or the other. So I wish you luck because there are important things that you need to look at from Auditor General reports to Secretary Benson to whatever that you need to shine some light on. Some of them are going to be big. Some of them are going to be small stories, but still important. So I think you're going to stay on it with the 6 subcommittees. It gives you a little extra play.
Yes.
Well, hey, I appreciate you being with us. I know you're a busy man, and it's been fun to watch what's going on because, like I said, somebody might watch Monday Night Football. I keep an eye on the Oversight Committee. So
that's why we love you, Jack.
Well, I wish you luck. Stay strong, and might check back in with you here as we find out about what's going on with these Oversight Committees, if that's all right, sir.
Anytime, and thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. Chairman Jay DeBoyer, House Oversight Committee Chair, on the Weekend Journal on News Talk 580 WTCM.